I think you're right. I think we are talking about escalation. I guess this whole unconditional surrender of Iran thing is no longer on the agenda. It doesn't look like Iran's prepared to give up. Gee, I'm shocked. I was completely unprepared for this. I think Donald Trump is flailing in a number of different directions right now. He's in his mind, he's been trying to avert or defeat a potential nuclear threat that could emerge in Iran from destroying Israel. But the war has moved well beyond that one issue, and he's having trouble finding a way to get out of it. But he runs into serious problems of his own making. And of course, you're familiar with the first one. No one believes anything Donald Trump says anymore. Now, that's not exclusively a problem for us in foreign relations. It's increasingly a problem here inside the United States. You can't repeat things that are fundamentally untrue over and over and over again, then change your story, and then once again reverse gears and go back to the original lie that you told and expect anybody to take you seriously. Now, the problem for him with Iran is, well, we've killed all of their leaders, or as many as we could. We've done this when we were supposedly in a state of ceasefire. Then we have broken the ceasefires ourselves, things that we said we never would. I mean, I could go down the list. Well, what's the problem with it? First of all, what incentive exists right now for Iran to sign up for any agreement of any kind? I just don't see it. I don't see any evidence that any ceasefire could be brokered and would be taken seriously, because none of them have ever lasted for any length of time. And the Iranians will conclude, and I think not unreasonably, that whatever the ceasefire does, it's ultimately designed to prepare U.S. forces for further operations in the future against Iran. The entire notion of what are we in this war for boils down to something that I said to you very early on that I thought it would eventually become, and that is the aim is the total destruction of the Iranian state and its society. The Iranians know that. For them, this is existential. We in the United States don't really understand this. The average American isn't keeping up with that. He is keeping up with other matters, which we can talk about, that are largely economic and financial in nature. And those things could easily bring this war to an end. In fact, I would argue that we're in a race right now between the damaging things that we've done to the world and ourselves economically and financially, and whether or not that will bring an end to the war, or secondly, the recognition that short of a nuclear attack, nothing can be done, and therefore we're leaving. Now, there is a third option that we need to discuss, and that's the nuclear one, because I think that's really on the table for the Israelis, not necessarily for us, but for them. So we can talk about those things, but I think people need to understand nothing will be rebuilt in the region. There will be no new pipelines, no new infrastructure, nothing, no new desalination plants until the investors, the lenders, are absolutely 100% confident that we will not return instantaneously to another war because of Donald Trump's whims or feelings. So this is a catastrophe on a scale that is much greater today than it was a month ago. A month ago, there was still a willingness to believe that this could be ended in some fashion. And the MOU, however distasteful, was signed by Trump, and then he made his famous statements. I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. The world economic condition could become a depression. We need to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then he turns right around, contradicts everything he said yet again. So at this point, no one believes him. No one's going to listen to anything he says. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with, as you point out, escalation. Now, if you look at the strikes, the patterns on the American side are pretty clear. Very heavy strikes along the coast, which creates the impression among many of us that there is some plan to use ground forces in some way against the Iranian coast of the Persian Gulf. The other pattern is, of course, in and around Israel, particularly in Jordan and the Arab states that have supported and helped to defend Israel. Those radars, those missile batteries, those establishments have been destroyed. So Iran is positioning itself, obviously, for two things. One is to utterly destroy Israel when the time comes by preparing the battlefield for that planned destruction. Now, that's not because they're dedicated to it. If there were an agreement that they could live with, that we could live with, that was reliable, I think that could be avoided. But right now, I just don't see any evidence for that. The second part is it's obvious to them that we plan to come ashore somewhere between Chabahar and Karg Island. That's coming. That's what they think, and they're probably right. And I wrote a long piece in my recent Substack called Trump's War to the Last Missile, explaining why that would end very badly for us. So where are we today? Well, the world economic situation is continuing to deteriorate very rapidly. I think we're going to be at $150 a barrel very shortly within the next few weeks, probably 200 in a couple of months or more. And it's not just gasoline and diesel, it's all the distillates, everything else that goes with the Persian Gulf, from sulfuric acid to, unfortunately, fertilizer and helium and so forth. So the world is now very definitely on a glide path to depression. It's going to be worse in some places and better in others. Some people think it'll be a very hard recession in the United States. I think we'll be lucky if that turns out to be the case. Because how do you combat this? Well, the predisposition when you have high inflation and things are going badly has been to print money. Well, I suppose we can do that. But then it makes it harder on the bond market right now, because right now the bond market, I think the 10-year, which is really the bellwether for trouble, is at about 4.6%. And most experts think when it hits 5%, that we will be unable to service our debt and we will go under. So looking at these various factors, I think most rational people in the position that Donald Trump occupies would say, stop. We can't go on.
All right, so you mentioned a lot of interesting things. I want to go to the Israel one, the strategy. Funny you mentioned this, because I saved an article about it to bring it up, and that's a summary of it. Iran may be using attacks on regional basis to blind Israel before any direct escalation. My team posted this today. Systemic strikes on radars, air defenses, and logistics hubs in Jordan, Bahrain, and Kuwait could reduce early warning time for Israel, making regional detection networks a key strategic threat. And from what I understand, that's not my expertise, is that when Iran fires missiles, it's those early warning radars that know the trajectory of the missiles, and they send the coordinates to the air defense systems. That these air defense systems, they don't scan the entire sky; they scan the segment of the coordinates sent by the early warning radar. And if these early warning radars are struck, it reduces the efficacy of the air defense systems, because then it has to scan a much wider area. And that is the Iranian strategy. And we're seeing the results of that strategy by the precision of their strikes. Obviously, some of it because of Chinese satellites, but others is because of the work they did in the early days of the war. Is my understanding correct from this? And then I'll add a question to it, Colonel, is why Israel? Is it because Israel's being used to attack Iran by the U.S.? All the refueling aircraft and the fighter jets are moving from the Gulf to Israel? Or is it because Iran sees Israel as a threat and they think they should create deterrence against future Israeli aggression?
Well, let's get something straight. You said the United States is using Israel to attack Iran. Well, we have certainly used air bases there. We've stationed Patriot batteries, THAAD batteries, radars, and so forth. But Israel is using us to attack Iran. We are not using Israel to attack Iran. And we need to talk about that because of some of the recent...
I meant Israeli airports. I
just want to be sure everybody gets that straight. We'll talk a little bit about some comments from Ben Gvir and I guess Smotrich, recent ones too, that help clarify some of this. First of all, the Iranians are very astute thinkers. They're long-term strategic planners. That's why they're in the position of dominance and strength right now that they are. They are very definitely preparing Israel for the worst. And they have an added bonus. Whatever destruction you mete out to the statelets in the Persian Gulf, like Kuwait and others on the west coast of the Persian Gulf, is a bonus because they are all Israeli dependencies or supporters in one form or another. UAE is the worst offender, obviously, but from the standpoint of the Iranians, all of these statelets are enemies. They are bases for attack against Iran, period. Whether it's American, Israeli, doesn't make any difference to them. So the response that's coming from Iran in the days ahead to the things that President Trump is talking about will eliminate those statelets. And that's very important because of something else I said to you very early on. There was a feeling in the region, a strong feeling that Sykes-Picot was dead. Now, King Abdullah of Jordan, I think, is currently in the United Kingdom. I don't know if this is going to be his new permanent residence or he's coming back. But I think Jordan is part of the Sykes-Picot arrangement, and I don't think it's going to survive. There are 11 to 14 million Palestinians living in that country. He and his father managed the Palestinian problem in large measure for Israel. In return, they received enormous benefits from the United Kingdom and Great Britain and the United States that helped keep their society afloat and their economy working. I think these things are all coming to an end because of the damage that Iran is inflicting across the region. The statelets are creatures of British imperialism. Nobody wants them. Now, that's not necessarily true for the people that live in these places, but we're talking about the ruling elites, which are referred to increasingly over here as the Epstein class of the Arabian Peninsula. So anything they do at this point, if you're sitting in Iran and you can destroy not only our bases, but the desalination plants, the oil infrastructure on the West Coast, is a strategic bonus. And in the meantime, there's nothing we can do. The bad news is, for the reasons that we started with, this is going to make the depression much worse. It's going to make the economic downturn last much longer for the reasons we discussed. Who's going to go in there, repair, rebuild, and refinance? At this stage, nobody. That's why it's so vital and essential, and has been really from the beginning, that Donald Trump bring this to an end. And that brings us to Israel. Can he end this? And I think it's perfectly obvious that he cannot.